figure that this whole time we're together is going to be blessed. We're going to learn a few things about each other, talk about a very important subject, and if you have something to add, we have microphones for you to do it. And we just, Spirit is here, and we thank you, Spirit, ahead of time, that this will be a very successful meeting. Amen.
Amen.
I want to talk about the wisdom of embracing change. And they say if you can do it when you're right in the middle of it, when it's really, really hard for you, if you can just call down Spirit and say, I don't know why I'm going through this, but I'm accepting it. That's what they call non-resistance. If we resist something, it just clings to us tighter. They used to have a little thing that we got down in Tijuana. It was a little straw thing, and you would stick it on your finger. The harder you pulled on it, the more it clung to your finger. If you let go of it, you could take it off real easily. And that's the way change is. The harder we cling to the way things were, the harder it is for us to get used to change. We have to learn through prayer, through guidance, to be able to let go of something. Now, I'm going to talk about 4 times in my life when I had the hardest change to get used to. And the first was a divorce. After 25 years of marriage and 6 children, my husband wanted to leave. And he had many reasons, but primarily he wanted to travel. He was retiring. He was a dean over at Grossmont College, and he wanted to retire. He wanted to start traveling. And he knew I would not be a good traveler, and I'm not. I like being at home. Even going to Unity Village, which was so wonderful. The first time I was there, I called my husband and said, pack up your bags, we're moving here. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and I'll get a chance to talk about that later. That's one of the changes that I really looked forward to and really changed my life for the better. But I couldn't accept that divorce. I mean, I did, but inside I was just, no, why is this happening? God, I've been such a good little girl. Why is this happening to me? What did I do? And, now I know that it's just the way things are. He changed, I changed, conditions changed. It was hard, but you know what? It opened it up for me to meet the love of my life. And we were married 39 years before he passed away 9 years ago. He was quite well known here in the church. Everybody knew Jim. Jim could fix anything. He could do anything. He was like Dick. You could call on him for anything. He knew everything about everything, and he was good at fixing it. And it's good to have those people around. He's got his name on a placard back there somewhere because he was so wonderful. He was the wind beneath my wings. I did the showy stuff. He recorded when I did the message. He recorded when I did, he recorded anyway most of the time. He sat back there and recorded for many years. But I lay on the bed one day saying, I don't know why this is happening to me. Please, please, let it get easier. And just a small, infinite bit it did. And I know now that was Holy Spirit blessing me And I began to at least be able to accept it on the outside. It took a long time for me to understand why it was happening to me. 5 years and had 6 beautiful children. And if there's not any other reason for us having been married, those 6 children are my reasons. I wouldn't take anything back that made it possible for me to have them. And they're my rocks now. They're the wind beneath my wings now. They're supporting me in every way. 2 boys and 4 girls. The second change that was very, very difficult took place before the divorce was a very beloved brother's death. He was a pilot in World War II. He went through like 76 missions, never got a scratch, but he saw a lot of his buddies go. And that just leaves a mark on you. And he was out in the reserves, and he wanted to fly. He still wanted to fly. And he hooked up with a little airport that was just getting started, and they didn't have enough money, so they told their pilots and their co-pilots to go and get other jobs. And France was buying fighter airplanes that the U.S. had used in World War II, and they were asking people who had been pilots in World War II to fly them over there. That's the thing. He wanted to fly one of those fighter planes. He loved to fly. He loved the feel of it. When he sat in an airplane, he wanted to feel like it was his wings. And this great big bomber that he had to fly was not the same thing. It was like flying a building. And but he was good, and he did it. But he could not resist the chance, even though he knew those things were really not in good shape. They had to stop over New York State and land and put it back together with chewing gum and hairpins and anything they could. He got back in that plane and he flew toward France, and over Scotland, an electrical storm hit that plane, and there she went. There was nothing left except his tags. And I had a very hard time to getting over that. Why? Why did this happen? He was 32, he had 5 children. He left a beautiful little boy that never really knew him. And that was another thing that I've just been able, since I got into Unity, to accept that he had to die. He was our golden boy. He was just blonde, blue-eyed, curly hair, big smile, personality that wouldn't quit. And I never pictured him dying so soon. So that was really, really hard on his whole family. His whole family was just gaga about him. And the third thing that was hard was when my daughter, Dale, the oldest girl, 67, died of cancer. What is a terrible one, the skin cancer. Oh. It was, and it took her a long time to go because she really had a strong character, but she finally had to let go. Her father, my ex-husband, had died in December. My husband died in the following April, and then she died the following December. So that was a whammy. It really was. Because, of course, I still had fond feelings for my ex-husband. You never really stop loving somebody that you really loved in the first place. And we were children together. It was like we grew up in the Garden of Eden, just very innocent. And then the fourth thing is when my second husband died. That really hit me hard. He was 2 years younger than I was. He wasn't supposed to go first. All my life, I had been sheltered. I went from the bosom of my family at age 18 into a marriage that lasted 25 years and a husband who was very strong and very much in charge. I didn't even write checks. I didn't even want to. I hadn't done anything. And all of a sudden, here I am. I still had 3 children left at home. And I had to manage the money. And it was very, very hard. And I resisted it for a while. And then I could tell, well, I better go ahead and learn what I'm doing, because I either do it or we fall apart. The 3 children were taken every 2 weeks on the weekend. Their father picked them up. There was no animosity between us. Thank God. Somebody told me when I was in the throes of the divorce, whatever you do, don't ever say anything bad about your ex-husband in front of your children. Don't even think it, because that makes it doubly hard for them. And divorce is so hard on children. I don't care how amicable it is. It's so hard on children. So then my husband, the 4th one, the divorce, my brother, my daughter, and my husband. I was alone for 3 years, and I was getting pretty good at it. But along comes Jim, and he just took over, and that's fine with me. And when he retired, he even took over the cooking and the shopping. It was a wonderful, wonderful marriage. It really was. Because as I say, I was flitting around here doing the platform stuff, and I was Sunday school teacher, and I was Sunday school director, and I was just over here all the time. It was just, this was my life, this church. And once we used to all be over there for the fellowship holidays. Now Arthur had his office over there, and the Sunday school rooms were over there, and somebody was, what's that noise? It looks like somebody's just breaking up the Sunday school room. And he says, that's just June turning the furniture around again. Because I would come over at least once a week and sometimes twice a week and make it, how can I make this cozy? How can I make this inviting? So I was always changing it around. And it was my life. And then I was taking classes from a dear little lady called Marion Brown, who was one of the first ones to graduate and become a minister in the years when Charles and Myrtle were alive. And they're the ones that handed her certificate when she got on the stage. And I loved hearing her tell stories, just like Inez, because she was in it when it was very, very young. And it was a wonderful atmosphere to go to Unity Village. I hope it's still that way. You would walk down those streets, and there was just such an air of love, just such a feeling of love. Everybody you met, they knew you instantly, and you knew them, and it was just, you would pass them going one way, and they're going the other way, and that place, it had such an ambience about it. It was like my college. It was like my campus. When I graduated, I felt like I had gotten my BA. And I was the proudest thing when I went across that stage and got my certificate. There's a picture of me. I'm grinning from ear to ear. And then came back home to Arthur and Marion and all of them. When she retired, she was associate minister here, and when I first joined, and she had the midweek service. I mean, she filled, it was a little chapel, and she filled it. And she asked me to take over from her. Arthur really wanted to do it himself, but it was actually the only job she had, because he never let anybody else preach. That was his thing. He mellowed after a while. After he married Virginia, he mellowed. He let several people preach. He let me preach. I think it's the first time a minister ever let a Unity licensed teacher preach. I really hadn't ever heard of it before. And he was glad to do it, because he was becoming a playboy, jet setter. And so it was time, and he was ready to let go. And so he started by letting, and for a while, China Williams, a lot of you knew her. She was associate minister. Those years are so glorious. And all came about, that first change, because when we married, he was my first husband. He was a Christian Scientist, and I was a very, very devout Baptist.
Wow.
I don't know what threw us together, but he couldn't understand my church, and I couldn't understand his, so we finally quit trying, and he let me take the children. I moved from Baptist to Methodist to Presbyterian. It got a little bit less emotional with each move, and that's what I needed, because I felt like when I finally got away from the Baptist church that I had been emotionally blackmailed all those years. Well, everybody doesn't feel that way. I realized that. In fact, when I was taking a class here from Marion Brown for credit, and I said something about that, she said, "June, that's enough. She said, you learn more about the Bible than a lot of people that come to these classes. And just think of all the good things you learned. You were where you were meant to be." That was the first time I ever heard anybody say that. Where you are is where you're meant to be. If you go somewhere else, it's because you make up your mind to, deep inside, for a reason. Everything we do is for a reason. But when I was in an Edgar Casey class, I don't know how many of you have heard of him, and it was the first time I ever learned how to meditate. It was in that class. I'd heard the word, but it didn't mean anything to me, really. And the kind of prayers I learned were always begging prayers. Oh, please, God. Oh, please, God. Please, God. Please. And I started learning in an Edgar Casey class that it was much more effective if you had affirmative prayer. That's where I was first introduced to it. And the class was closing, and I said, quote, "Gee, I wish there was a church that had this philosophy, this theosophy." And they said, "Well, there is." And I said, "What's it called?" "Unity." I never heard of it. Can you believe it? I used to pick up the Daily Word in the laundromat. People would leave their daily words in the laundromat. And so the first time I saw one, I thought, well, I knew that. And the first time I read one, I was, but I had to take the time to get rid of what I had grown up with spiritually. And I realized I was not growing spiritually because I felt like I was being cheated. I didn't feel close to God anymore. When I was a child and joined the church, I felt very close to God. But then when I got into Unity and learned a new concept of God, I realized God had been there with me all along, but I was just not aware of it. And I realized that you can't be aware of God until you know the truth. Lessons in Truth. How many have read Lessons in Truth? I can't, that and Eric Butterworth's Discover the Power Within You. If you don't read any other books, I know there are a lot of new ones, But if you don't read any other books, read those 2 books. I've read them over and over again, and Unity saved my life. It turned it around, because I was at the end of my rope. Not only had I lost my husband, I no longer could believe what I had been taught to believe all my life. And it was painful. I felt bereft. What am I going to do? I don't have a church to every Sunday because I just can't listen to what they say anymore. The first thing that made such an impression on me was when I learned there was no hell, there was no devil. I mean, I was a 40-year-old woman afraid that I might die and go to hell and burn forever. Now, my mother said she didn't get that, and I said, well, where were you? Because that's what they taught me. I know I heard that. I know I didn't make that up. That's what they taught me. If I did not believe the way they were telling me to believe, I don't know if they still do it or not. I know some wonderful people that are Baptists, and I learned from Marion Brown, I don't put down any other church. You say every Sunday, whatever your walk of life is, wherever you are spiritually, that's where you're supposed to be, and we welcome you. And that, to me, was one of the second things about Unity that was so wonderful. The open arms. I walked in, my second husband was in the same boat I was. We didn't feel like either one of us, we had a spiritual home anymore. And when we walked into our first Unity Center, it no longer exists. It was down in Mission Valley. Great big place. We just turned to each other and said, we're home. We have found, what?
Wasn't it Ross Breakwell? Ross Breakwell?
Yes. What a speaker. What a man. He was such a wonderful speaker, and he made things so plain. And we walked into that room, and there were people hugging each other, all people, all colors, all accents, it was just, love was palpable. To this day, when I think about it, I get that feeling like I'm just going to take off and fly, because it was such a relief. Nice. To know there was no place called heaven. It was a state of mind. And I don't say I haven't gotten into that state of mind but I know how to get out of it now. And before, I was in hell most of the time. And I was not as good a mother or as good a wife because of it. In the beginning, when they were tiny babies, I was a wonderful mother. But when they started crawling and I couldn't keep up with them anymore, I was not the mother I wish I had been. But you wouldn't know it to hear them talk to me now. Oh, I read to them. That covered all the sins. I read to them, and I had wanted to be an actress on the stage. Surprise, surprise. and they were my captive audience. So, I didn't realize that I was doing what everybody said you should do, is to read for children. So there is a change. Look back on it and think about it. What happened after it happened? I turned my life completely around. I was so happy. I was really, really happy. Recently, there's been another change knocking at the door. And I'll admit that I'm a hidebound unitic. And to me, that meant anything that goes to change the Unity Church it's threatening to me. So when I first heard about all these changes, I started tightening up, resisting. I had to let go of that. I don't know exactly what's going on. I've tried to understand it, but it really doesn't matter, because I don't think the spirit of unity is going to be tamped down. It's still going to be there. And recent graduates have proven the same thing to me that I learned in the first place. It's still still what it is. So those are the four major changes. I'm still working on why my husband had to die. I know they discovered he had massive lung cancer in both lungs. And he had been a smoker until he was 50, and he stopped. That helped his heart. But once those things, what do they call it, from tobacco get into your system, they really never leave. And he had been smoking since he was 14, behind the barn. A little Michigan country boy. And we had such a wonderful life together. I was blessed. I had 2 good husbands. I've been very blessed. I have 6 wonderful children. I've been so blessed. And I might not have realized that if I hadn't discovered Unity, or maybe Unity discovered me. I don't know, but it just like, it took me into its arms. It was like, come on, baby, everything's gonna be just fine, and patted me on the head. I really am struggling to explain it, but I think you must know. You can't walk into any Unity church without feeling that. You really can't, because I've been at several others visiting, and you know where you are. In fact, when I went back to Unity Village for the first time, I was in an airport waiting for somebody to come up with a sign, Unity, and somebody didn't have a sign, but they walked up to me and they said, "You're Unity, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, and so are you. You know they're from Unity, because it's not just a smile, it's some kind of spirit that has gotten into us. And I don't mean to say other paths don't have the same thing, but this was the right one for me, and I found it. And I have overcome, or I'm still in the process of overcoming whatever changes are taking place that are different from the way they were when I went to school. I've tried to understand it, but then I thought, it really doesn't matter if I understand it. I know the Spirit of God is there. And that's still leading. That Spirit is still leading. So the change that brought about my life when my husband died, my second husband, I knew there was supposed to be some good in it. And the good in it was that I became more independent. At age 80, I became independent, because that's how old I was when he died. And now I've gone almost 10 years without him, but I'm not really without him. He's there. And oh, his children and my children loved him. I don't think they could have loved him any more than mine did, and that was such a gift. We had the service right here, and I'm telling you, it was really hard for everybody to accept. I thought my youngest son, he never cries, but he was so wrought up. He just cried and cried and cried, and really was a shock to me, because he's kind of a, taciturn little he's a young man. He's 52. They don't ever grow old when they're your children. I can't believe it. He's a dean, and has not. Anyway, he has a very high position in Rochester, New York, Rochester University. He's the recruiting dean. He goes all over the world recruiting the best for the college, and he has his father's bent for traveling, so it's the perfect job for him. And his father got to travel all over the world because he married a lady who was just as eager as he was. So it was all right. It was supposed to happen. And I know my Jim was tired. He'd worked hard all of his life. He really was tired. And he could not stand the thought of being disabled at all. He wrote ahead of time, no radical treatments. And he would have been on oxygen, not able to take care of himself. So Arthur was there in the room with me, and he said, "Jim, it's time for you to go into the light." And that made it possible for me to say it. I don't know if you could understand it because I was crying when I said it, but I said, they tell me it's time to let you go. And so they were going to turn it off when the children all came back from lunch. And it was his daughter on one side and me on the other side and two of his granddaughters at his feet, caressing his feet and caressing his hands and letting him know we were there. And he did not wait. He always had a mind of his own. And he says, "No more just fooling around, I'm going now." So he did, right there. I really wasn't sure I could stand it, but I did. I had one of my beloved daughters on one side of me and my beloved stepdaughter on the other side of me, and they led me down to the little room where people went for prayers and for privacy. And I was crying and I was sad, but still there was something in me saying, "I can do this. I can do this." And I had to learn to cook all over again, and I'm not very good at it. He was such a good cook. His family ran a family inn back in Michigan, and the kids all learned to cook. And he came to dinner one night to the children and me before we were married, and I said, I had never bought a whole chicken. I just bought parts. And I said, "It's time for me to cook a whole chicken." And so I had it, and he was standing there talking to me, and I was, he says, "Would you like for me to do that for you?" It was killing him. And he took my butcher knife, and he went, and there were all the parts, And he says, "Your knives need sharpening." And he did. He sharpened all of them for me because I didn't even know they were dull, but that was one of the reasons I was having a hard time. I never did learn how to cut up a chicken. I still buy the parts. But he would buy a whole chicken. He could cook anything. He let me cook once in a while because I cooked before. I had very healthy children, so they had to have good meals, but it was just mediocre compared to his. I kept saying, you should open a restaurant. He says, "No, it wouldn't be any fun. I wouldn't even enjoy doing it for a living." He never even considered it, but he loved for all my children to come over, and he cooked for them. And it was a lesson for me to learn, to step aside, get out of his kitchen and leave him alone. But it got to where we would do it every other night. He had a little schedule put up. He's June cook, Jim cook, and he caught on real fast. He says, "You're just heating up my leftovers when it's your turn." Well, it was better than anything I could cook. I said, "You don't want them to go to waste, do you?" Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'd make my mouth water to recite all the different dishes he could do. He suffered through several years of just me cooking the Thanksgiving dinner, although he did take over doing the turkey. He did take over that. But he was in such pain that he couldn't breathe easily at night. And he never complained. I didn't realize how much pain he was in. He never said anything. Me, if I hurt, I say I hurt. And I want sympathy, and I want baby myself, and then I don't hurt anymore. But he wasn't like that. He wanted to be alone if he didn't feel good. And he finally said one day when we were walking up the steps, and He was obviously hurting it. I still wasn't aware of what was going on because he was so good at hiding it. He says, if it's going to be like this, I want to just go. And I was just horrified. You don't talk like that if you're a lunatic. You don't talk about dying, and you don't talk about... But I didn't understand then. But after it happened, I did understand. And he was very patient with me. I mean, he was so kind, so loving, so smart. To this day, I miss him, of course, but I grew up after he died, and I was alone for the first time in my life. For the first time in my life, I live alone. Because the 3 children with me the 3 years I was divorced. And as soon as the youngest son went to college, he got a scholarship to USC, and he was just back once in a while. But as soon as he moved out of his room, my mother moved in with us because her neighbor said she's getting some kind of dementia. So she moved in with us. We built a little granny apartment. She had her own kitchen, and I don't know how good that was. Jim caught her 2 or 3 times letting pans boil over before she would come in and eat with us at night, but she liked to have her own little kitchen where she prepared her own meals. She couldn't get out of the tub by herself. One time he was alone in the house, and she was yelling, "Come help me, I can't get out of the tub." He had been a policeman. Nothing fazed him. He had been a policeman for a little while, and he learned how to, any kind of situation, he could take care of. There wasn't anything he couldn't do. And he loved my old movies. They were tearjerkers most of the time. And I would see him over there, and he's got these big tears coming down. I mean, he was a big softy inside, but he was like the big John Wayne on the outside, you know. In fact, he liked to wear Western shirts and cowboy boots until he got to he couldn't wear them anymore because his cooking was so good. Once he said to me, "I think I better let you go back cooking because we're gaining too much weight." I said, "All right." So change is inevitable. Change is good. If you're going through some kind of change right now, and I don't mean exactly the way that sounds, like the change of life, but any kind of change that you're going through physically that seems so hard to take, you just have to know it's for good. If you know it up here and repeat it often enough, it'll get down here. And it makes life so much easier. I didn't think I could do all those things by myself. It's an awful lot to do when you live alone. I never did before, because he took care of everything. And that's a lesson that couples should learn. Don't let your husband do everything. Make him teach you how to do it, if you can. If you have a husband like I had, it wouldn't have worked because he just couldn't be bothered. He'd let me do a few things. He took over the vacuuming because I wasn't doing it very good. He washed the windows because I didn't get them clean. Once he started to do the laundry, I said, "Wait a minute, you got to leave me something. I'm doing the laundry. You can't do that." And I still mended things for him. And he said, "I want you to," because he knew that I had wanted to go on the stage. And he says, "But what I got into Unity was so much better. I would never have lasted in the theater. I would have been mowed down. What a life that is." But in the church, and Arthur gave me free rein, I would ask him if I could do something like, special with the kids. And he said, yes, it's all right. And thank you for asking me, because everybody didn't. They just went ahead and did it. And he was so glad. And we worked really well together. He was my mentor, and Arian Brown was my other one. They both were invaluable aid to me. I wouldn't have made it without them, or somebody like them. I'm sorry, I've talked too long. Are there any questions? We're almost out of time.
Would you like to have a question? You talked a lot about grief and, what you went through. I'm just curious, as you were actively going through grief, were you actively trying to bring the principles into your life? Like, were you doing that?
After I learned about them, yes. That's the reason I was able to come up above it a lot faster than before I got into the unity mode of life. It's second nature to me now. When I took that pratfall last Sunday, I just automatically started affirming, divine order taking place in my mind and in my body and all my activities right now. And oh boy, I'm telling you, it works. I didn't mean to preach a sermon. Well, who knows if I did or didn't. Yes, Jan?
Speaking of being in shows, don't forget, I forget what we were called, but the old Spice Girls, that you were the head of it and you had us dancing and singing and putting on a show. Remember that?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
Spice Girls.
The old Spice Girls.
Oh yeah. Oh, I got my acting and the writing. I wrote a script and we did the Old Spice Girls, which Jan came up with a name. I said something like the Spice Girls, only, something that shows we're not like the Spice Girls. And she said, well, how about the Old Spice Girls? And it just took off from there. We did that skit. We took that from the church to other churches and all over El Cajon. We did that 5 or 10 minute sketch. We did it next door at the Springs. And then later on, Sharon let me have a little drama group. We did radio. They wouldn't learn their lines, so I had to make it a radio so they could read. But when the children when I was in charge of the children, I was doing little plays over here, 10 minutes long, for Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. And one time, what's her name? The redhead who took over doing the drama. Anyway, her son was in it, and I was back there. And
Connie Hayes. Yeah.
Connie Hayes, yeah. Connie majored in drama, and I only minored in drama, so she really was a better director than I was. So I was directing the show, and I couldn't get them to speak loud enough. And she said, June, would you like some help? And I said, sure. Well, that was it. First thing you know, she was the one that was doing it, and that was fine with me. I was behind the scenes, and my children were putting on a good little play, and it was such good fun. I got my writing, I got my acting. Those are the two things I always wanted to do the most. I don't want you to think I'm acting when I'm up there giving a talk, but I am orating, and I got I learned how to do that. And in Unity Village, one of the classes I took said, if you've got some acting ability, it'll come in handy. Yeah. Just don't let it, take over. And sometimes I have. It's like I said, you give a speaker a microphone and let them have it, and they don't ever want to give it back to you. So I use all the talents God gave me. I feel very fulfilled. I've retired about 3 times, but I keep coming back. And I was so thrilled that I've been asked to do several things, and so proud of myself that I could get up there by myself, and I let it be known that I really didn't want any help, and what happens? Oh, Dick?
Jen stole my line, but I was going to say the same thing, that you did fulfill your acting and all of that theatrical stuff. You even wrote me into one of the old Spice Girls, remember?
Yeah, you and Jan were in one.
And added to the archives.
We were this old people who, we came out all bedraggled with our robes buttoned, wrong, and I said, we are the old Spice Girls. And at the end, after a few, I had them say 2 lines, and somebody had to stand up and show with a big, adults that haven't been on stage just do not like to learn lines. It was really, really something. But I had so much fun with it, and they did too. We had to quit. It was just, we were wearing out. I did the same thing at my club, in my clubhouse where I live. We did it several times up there. So I got my directing and my acting and my writing out of my system, and almost out of my system.
You had asked, you kind of hope the energy is still the same in Unity Village. Well, I wasn't back there 30, 40 years ago, but I can tell you it's still very loving. That presence,
Good.
You walk onto the campus, you feel peace.
Good.
You feel love. So it's,
You can walk through Myrtle's garden and feel her spirit there.
well, I don't know about Myrtle's spirit, but I know it feels pretty good.
I think if you felt anything good there, you were feeling her spirit. She was a beautiful, beautiful lady.
That is the energy that Myrtle had, was just pure love. And that's what you experience when you walk on the campus. There's no question about it. So, and PR or whatever, but there is some folks going back to World Day of Prayer this year in September. And so if anybody's interested in going back to the village to experience it yourself,
I hope you do.
it's not.
Oh, it's so wonderful. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very interested to hear about wisdom. And then I wanted to know what principles of wisdom, which is feeding every day spiritually.
Can you tell me what he's saying?
He's
Wisdom,
interested in wisdom, what wisdom can be used like every day on an
Like-
everyday basis.
The wisdom of embracing change. That's what I've been talking about.
okay.
We can acquire that wisdom.
Any
And you don't have to be 89. In fact, I think most of the young people around here know a lot more than I do. But any age is just a number.
Okay.
Yeah.
I heard that you said it is very good to learn wisdom through Bibles and to listen songs from the radio. So I don't know if this can help or can feed the wisdom. Is it?
I can't understand what he's saying. Can you tell me?
You tried to describe about the love, how you loved your husband, and how was making a wonderful family.
Yes.
Now I wanted to ask a question. In that family it was now the core elements of wisdom. That's why you were a perfect or wonderful family. Now, what did you believe in that family to become wonderful family?
Well, I just know the truth about them. I mean, we're all children of God. And I was helpful with healing with my youngest son when he was 9 years old and had hay fever, asthma.
Okay.
And he was so bad, and he refused to let me take him to the doctor, and he was not going to go get any more shots. So right in the middle of the night, I was in the next room, and I called Silent Unity for the first time and got prayers. And I honestly forgot all about my son for a while. I just sat there so peaceful, so peaceful. So this is what Unity did for me. Okay, is that what you wanted to know?
Yeah. Thank you.
So many things I could talk for hours about how we use the family.
Yeah.
But my time is up.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
You need the microphone back here.
I really don't so much have a question.
Is that working?
Yes, love, it is.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for sharing that. That's an amazing story. It's so crazy. Everyone has a great story here, and that was just wonderful. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, really.
It was an honor for me. Thank you.
We're honored.
There's a blessing for you and for me, so great that the eye cannot see. It comes as a token of love and goodwill. 'Tis peace, sweet peace. Peace, peace, sweet peace. I rest in the silence and pray, giving thanks to the Father each day for peace, sweet peace. When I rest in this wonderful peace, all thoughts of the outer world cease. I dwell in a heavenly kingdom of God through peace, sweet peace. Peace, peace, sweet peace. I rest in the silence and pray, giving thanks to the Father each day for peace, sweet peace. I am purified body and soul. Through infinite mind I'm made whole. I am quickened and strengthened, at last I am free through peace, sweet peace. Peace, peace, sweet peace. I rest in the silence and pray, giving thanks to the Father each day for peace, sweet peace. Peace, peace, sweet peace. I rest in the silence and pray, giving thanks to the Father each day for peace, sweet peace. Giving thanks to the Father each day for peace, sweet